friends. So, today, the topic of today's session is ER model. So, since it's a very important topic in database management system, and this model, we have relational model, and apart from that, we have this entity relationship models. So, this is a very important concepts that today I am going to discuss with all of you. So let's begin with. So the very first topic here is entity relationship model. Now we will discuss thoroughly about this part in each step. So basically, this model is a different model from the relational model. In the relational model, we have specific tables, we have columns and rows. But here you will see it's being designed as, and it is used for high level database design. Okay, so it is used for high level DB design. So, whenever you are designing a database for for some university students, we are when we are designing the database system for high level purpose, then we need to use this entity relationship model. Okay, so in this lecture, we are going to thoroughly discuss about what it is and how we can design. So let's begin with. Also, it's also known by one of the name called diagrammatic DB design, because here we are designing the database model using certain diagrams. So diagrammatic DB design. Okay, so this is another name for this, right? Okay, so now what is this and what is inside? Let's begin. Uh, Basically, all the constraints of database design are represented in the diagram. So, I mean, this is known as diagrammatic DB design because we are representing the constraints. Uh, Constraints are certain conditions or applicable for the database. So, the constraints of the DB design, I mean, the database design, are applicable, are represented in form of diagram. Okay, so that is why it is named as diagrammatic DB design, are represented in diagrams. Okay, so let's start. So what are the main components? Before designing the database, we need to know what are the main components of the design. Okay, so if we talk about the main components, so the main components of the database design are, first is entities. Okay, second one is entities, or you could say entities set, because we don't have one entity or so, we have various entities. Then we have the attributes for the entities. Okay, we are going to discuss what are these. And the third one is the relationship sets, relationships or relationship sets. Okay, so these are the main components of the DB design, right? Now, what are the attributes and the entity sets and relationship sets? So first we will discuss about the attributes. Okay. I mean, now we are discussing about the components of the ER model. Okay. So by each one, explaining each one, we'll proceed. So what are the attributes? So attributes are represented, since we already know that we use diagrams to represent the database design and the constraints based on the database. So here we have these attributes. Now attributes are represented as oval. Okay, this is an attribute, and attributes can be of different types. For example, we can have key attribute. Key attribute, also known as the major determining attribute, that is the candidate key or so. So the key attribute represented by this. So we have different representation for each part, right? We can have multi-valued attributes. Multi-valued attributes are those attributes which can have multiple values for the same. Okay, so we can have multiple multi-value attributes, and this can be represented by as this. Okay, now we have something called derived attributes. Okay, so we have this derived attributes, and attributes are those whose value is determined or derived from other attributes. Okay, so values are derived from other attributes, and these other attributes are the stored attributes. I'll explain what are the stored attributes, but these derived attributes are represented by broken line oval. Okay, so basically we have attributes, and attribute is represented by a oval sign, right? But inside the attribute we can have different kinds of categories of attributes, like the key attribute, which is represented by this, multi-valued attributes, which is represented by this, derived attribute represented as this. Okay, very important is the key attribute. Key attribute is our candidate key. Okay, we'll see what is it. And okay, so we were talking about the derived attribute. I already said that derived attribute are those whose values are derived from other stored attributes. Okay, for example, we have the date of birth of the student. Now, this date of birth is an attribute. Okay, it could be an attribute for a particular student. Let's say Ram. Okay, Ram is a student and it has a date of birth and it is stored somewhere in the database. Okay, now we need to derive the age of Ram. So Ram was admitted 4 years ago in a school or a university or whatever, and we have his date of birth. Now we want the age of Ram at this stage. So we can derive the age by subtracting the date of birth from the current date, right? So this age depends upon the stored attribute, that is the date of birth. Okay, this is not a key attribute. I've just okay. So we can derive the age of Ram from this stored attribute, right? So this age here is our derived attribute. Okay, so date of birth is the stored attribute, right? And since the age can be derived, value of age can be derived from the stored attribute, so it is a derived attribute. Okay, so this way these two attributes are interrelated, right? And we can derive the age as system age minus date of birth, right? Hence, age is a derived attribute and date of birth is a stored attribute. Clear? So this way we have different kinds of attributes. One of the attribute is a composite attribute. Okay. Now we have this composite attribute is what? It is a combination of two or more than two attributes, like we are combining two or more attributes into one. Okay, so attributes which can represent as two or more attributes, right, is name denotes that attribute that can be represented as two or more attributes. I mean, it's a combination of two or more attributes. Now what could be this? Like, if we are thinking about the composition, then definitely it will be represented as this one, and it is a combination of two or more attributes, right? So this is a composite attribute. These are the simple attributes and this is the composite attribute. Now how it could be, like for example, we are storing the addresses of a different person in the database. Okay, so the addresses would not be a straightforward one word address. Obviously it will contain something called house number. It will contain the street. Okay, every address has a particular street associated with that. Then it has a city in It can be in different city. Then it has a state, country, and so on. So now you see that address is one attribute, okay, but it is represented as a combination of two or more attributes. Hence, address is a composite attribute. So basically, these are the attribute sets I already discussed. So attribute is any associated property with the entity set or an entity. Okay, so like you can say any adjective or anything specific to or any particular specific quality of particular entity set. Okay, so that will be more clearer if we discuss this entity set. Okay, so the second component of the model is the entity sets. Okay, so what are entity sets? So set of similar entity. Okay, these are also called object set or tuple set. Set of similar entities, also called object or tuple sets. Okay, so how it is represented? For example, it is represented diagrammatically as rectangular box. Now, if we represent it, the entity and the attribute as one in one single diagram, so let's say this is our entity set. Let's say this entity represent all the employees. We already discussed that entity set is a collection or a set of similar entities. So if we have different employees working in an organization, so employee set will contain the all the employees working in that organization, right? Now, these employees will have certain uh, attributes, right? So some of the the major attribute of employee, like you can identify any employee by its name, of course. Now that name will be having two components. That will be the first name and another will be the last name. Okay. So the name is an attribute for an employee in the employee set, and it can have the first name and the last name. Okay. Then for every employee, we have a certain specific date of birth. It can be a stored attribute. For every employee, we can derive the age of the employee. Now, age can be derived from the date of birth. Therefore, age is a derived attribute, and hence we have represented age with the dotted oval lines, right? Now, every employee will have their specific phone number, correct? Now, this phone number would be also there will be one phone number for the office and one for the home. So, definitely it will be a multi-valued attribute, and hence it is a representation of the multi-valued attribute. Every employee will have their passport number. Passport number will be a specific number. We can have any Aadhaar number or whatever. So it will be unique. Okay. Now, employee will be identified inside the organization by their employee ID. Now, two employees cannot have the same employee ID, and employee ID is the major identification for an employee in their office. Okay, sorry, it actually got as the multi-valued, right? So let's make it as single. Okay. So every employee will have their employee ID, but this will be unique for every employee. Like two employees can have the same names, two employees can have the same date of birth, two employees can be of the same age, can have the same phone number as well, right? Or maybe they are siblings and they have the same home phone number. But this employee ID will be unique for the organization for each employee. Like in an organization for the employee, they will have a specific and a unique employee ID, right? So that is why it is our key attribute. So whatever we discussed, I just grabbed all in one figure, So this is the entity set, and all these are the different attributes that we discuss. So this is the entity attribute model or ER model. But before discussing this, we need to know about the relationship sets as well. Right. Now, before discussing the relationship sets, what we are doing here, we are designing the database model, okay, using the entity relationship structure, using the diagrams, okay. So, what are the basic steps for designing the database model? So, steps to design database, right? So let's discuss what are the steps. So when the very first step, when we are trying to design a database model, high level database model using the ER diagram, first we seek to look of the requirements. What are our requirements? Okay, we can't just pick it some attributes and the set and just draw the diagram. It's not like that. We have to check first the requirements. The second thing is designing the ER diagram. Okay, now we have the requirements ready. We will design the ER diagram. There are several tools also to design the ER diagrams, or we can just design in a simple pen paper way. The third requirements is designing the DBMS table. After designing the ER diagram, we design the RDBMS table, relational database model. Okay, so this table designing is the third step. Okay, and in the fourth step, we have the normalization of the database so as to avoid any kind of redundancy that exists in the table, or any kind of inconsistency that could happen, right? So this is the normalization happening, and at the fifth step, we have the physical DB design, right? Lastly, at the sixth step, we have the design views. That is, we are designing the external schema for them. Okay. So this is the basic steps we use in designing the database model. Okay. In the next lecture, we will be discussing about the relationship sets, and we will be discussing more onto the ER diagram. So this was something basic related with the ER model, the some of the basic components. Of course, we haven't discussed yet the relationship sets that we'll discuss in the next lecture. We have some basic sets, entity set and attribute, different kinds of attributes that we discussed. So, and what are the steps for designing the DB? So, this was all about for this lecture. We'll discuss the relationship sets in the next lecture. Thank you for your time. Bye bye.